Dinosaurs move over from Joe Gibbs Racing to Kaulig Racing in 2022. Kevin Harvick and Chase Elliott are still not happy with each other after the incident at Bristol Motor Speedway, and NASCAR is very close to finalizing plans to move the Xfinity Series over to Portland Raceway. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got a ton of NASCAR stories set here today on the channel. Let's go and just jump straight into those really quickly. The first story we're going to talk about is Joey Gase. We have an update on Joey Gase in regards to his really scary accident that took place at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. About 93 or 94 laps into the Cup Series race at Las Vegas Motor Speedway, Joey Gase had a very scary incident going into turn number one. Basically, the tire completely came apart, and he hit the outside wall really hard, and basically almost went airborne going into turn number one, ended up crashing into the outside wall. The unfortunate news is that Joey Gase actually would have to go to the hospital. Now, the good news is Joey Gase, after that, has been released from the hospital after further evaluation. So it's really good to hear that Joey Gase has officially been released from the hospital, especially since that crash was really scary and really bad. We didn't get the best replays in regards to that, but we did end up seeing portions of that accident, and that was really scary. So it's really good to hear that Joey Gase is all right. Really good to hear that. And hopefully Joey Gase will be able to race this weekend at Talladega. I'm not sure what his plans are for the rest of the year, but hopefully he'll be able to race the rest of the year as this really unfortunate accident happened. Hopefully be able to race later this year. And now we're going to go and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Texas Motor Speedway. On Saturday afternoon, it was reported at Texas Motor Speedway that there was a huge explosion that happened at Texas Motor Speedway in the infield. The propane tank basically exploded in the infield and basically caused this massive explosion out at Texas Motor Speedway. I saw some anti-Texas jokes on Twitter, and in all seriousness, basically, I'm glad that no one got seriously hurt. According to reports from multiple reporters, no one got seriously hurt in that situation. I'm really happy about that because you don't want anybody to get seriously hurt, and I'm glad no one got hurt in that situation because that was extremely scary. They got a lot of coverage, and hopefully everybody's all right, and I believe no one got seriously hurt, so that's good overall. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Justin Bonsignore. As Justin Bonsignore was able to win the 2021 Wheel and Modified Tour Championship this past weekend. Justin Bonsignore has had a really awesome year in the Wheel and Modified Tour. This is his third ever NASCAR Wheel and Modified Tour Championship, so huge congratulations to Justin Bonsignore. Justin Bonsignore is going to go down as one of the legends of the Wheel and Modified Tour, join the likes of many legends of the sport, like a Mike Stefanik, who've raced in the sport in the past, and huge congratulations to Justin Bonsignore. He deserves a championship, and he's your 2021 Wheel and Modified Tour champion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Discord. As NASCAR is officially live on Discord, as announced on Friday by Brandon Williams on Twitter, basically said that the Discord for NASCAR is officially live. What this NASCAR Discord is going to be able to do is that there's going to be in-car audio for all playoff drivers, PRN, M&R broadcast, exclusive driver access, and specific channels to talk to NASCAR and other drivers and other people that are able to be part of that as well. I'm really happy that NASCAR set up a Discord. Discord is a major platform out there to where you can talk to people on Discord, have social gatherings, and become friends on the platform as well. I'm really happy that Discord is part of NASCAR. I think it's big overall that Discord gets a NASCAR platform. I've seen already a lot of people go on. It's been crazy what I've seen so far, but I'm really happy to see that Discord is officially getting into NASCAR. I'm really happy about that for sure. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Hemric, Trackhouse, and Chip Ganassi in one story. According to multiple reports, including from Alex Andreevich, she says that a company with the same mailing address as Hemric Automotive Group bought Chip Ganassi Racing's team property for $10.2 million earlier this month, according to property tax records. Now, a lot of people don't understand why this is important, because Hemric Motorsports has an affiliation with Chip Ganassi Racing. Chip Ganassi Racing gets their Hemric engines from that organization, and they do have a major alliance with Hemric Motorsports. And remember, Chip Ganassi Racing this past year got bought up by Trackhouse Racing. So what I do think that this has a lot more to do is that what I think this has to do with is basically Trackhouse Racing is going to have more of an affiliation with Hemric. Now, how big of an affiliation do they have with Hemric, and how big is it going to be? We don't know at this exact point, but this is very definitely an interesting report, considering, you know, this was a pretty kind of a story that kind of went under the radar and no one was really ever talking about. But I think it was really important that to bring this up, and it's good to see that Hemric has bought that property back up, and it's going to be more for the Hemric Automotive Group. But I do think what this also means is that Trackhouse is going to have a much bigger alliance with the organization. Really happy about that for sure, and it's glad that it's getting the property over there. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Justin Haley. As Justin Haley was speaking to media during Xfinity Series media days, and he says that he plans to race in all of the Cup Series races except possibly Phoenix. We'll talk about Justin Haley, where he'll be racing at this weekend in just a little bit. But this, I think, is a really good move for Justin Haley to get some experience, because remember, Justin Haley is going to be driving for Kaulig Racing full-time in the NASCAR Cup Series. Now, of how many races that he's ran this year, I don't think he is going to be eligible for the Rookie of the Year. He won't be able to go up against Austin Cindric, Harrison Burton for the Rookie of the Year. Since he's ran a majority of races, I think he's ran like 25 or 26 of the races so far in 2021 so far. So hopefully Justin Haley will have some good runs. He hasn't had a lot of great runs this year, but again, that 77 car, I don't think they focus on that car as much as they do on the other Spire Motorsports car that Kaulig drives for. So it makes a lot of sense why he hasn't been as competitive overall. But that being said, it's good to see that Justin Haley is getting a lot more experience in the NASCAR Cup Series going into next year. I'm really happy about that for sure. And hopefully Justin Haley will continue to have some really strong runs, because it would be really cool to see Justin Haley have some really strong runs going forward. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to go ahead and take a look at the Atlanta Motor Speedway repave and reconfiguration. Now, for a lot of you don't know, they are repaving and reconfiguring Atlanta Motor Speedway, and there were some images that came out, and it looks like they're very, very close to having the track done. There's a few things it looks like they still need to do on the racetrack, but it looks like it's really, really close to being done. Like I said, they are repaving and reconfiguring the track, and they're changing up the track going into next year. In my opinion, I'm not very big fan of them reconfiguring the track. I knew a repave was going to overall have to happen, because the track has not basically been repaved in such a long time. Remember, the track has not been repaved in the last 25 years. I think it's the oldest surface currently in NASCAR, so it made a lot of sense to repave it, but reconfiguring was not going to make a lot of sense to me. I really never understood why they did that. They could have gone back to the old way that Homestead kind of used to look like back in the day, but overall, it is what it is. Again, I'm still not overall entirely a big fan of it. We haven't seen the racing there yet, and the next gen car is there. What NASCAR is probably trying to do is they're trying to create super speedway racing at an intermediate track, and honestly, I don't think the racing in NASCAR wants is going to end up happening like NASCAR basically is going to happen, which I know that NASCAR wants super speedway racing intermediate tracks, and I feel like that's not what's going to end up happening in this situation. So it's definitely really interesting that they are repaving and reconfiguring, and I mean, it looks really cool, don't get me wrong. So it's going to look like a mini super speedway, but at the same time, it's definitely interesting. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Grant Enfinger. As Grant Enfinger reported on during the Fox broadcast that Grant Enfinger is really close to announcing his 2022 plans. Now, I'll be honest, I don't really know where Grant Enfinger is going to go. Michael Waltrip brought this up on the broadcast on Friday evening that he's really close to announcing his 2022 plans. I have not really heard anything in regards to where Grant Enfinger is going to go next year, but I do think that there's potentially one team that could pick him up for the 2022 season, and one team only. I think that Grant Enfinger is going to end up going to GMS Racing in 2022, especially since Grant said he's really, really close to announcing his plans. GMS has a big announcement that is going to be dropping on October 1st. And I think that Grant Enfinger definitely would fit the role of a guy who could go out there and win championships for GMS this year. Really, besides Sheldon Creed this year, really, and Zane Smith too in some ways, I don't think that the GMS program has been very competitive. And Sheldon Creed is going to be moving up to the NASCAR Xfinity Series next year, drive for Rich Schultz Racing. We don't know who his teammate exactly is going to be at this particular moment. I know some people brought up maybe Grant Enfinger could be going up to Xfinity to drive for RCR, but at the same time, I really think at this point that Grant Enfinger is going to go to GMS's Truck program. I think he'll definitely, if he goes to GMS, I think absolutely is going to be a championship contender. I think it also, not to mention, absolutely deserves to go over to that organization next year. As like I said, I think he's been a very solid driver, and I think going into next year, if he does end up going to GMS in 2022, I think he's going to overall be a huge benefit for the team, and hopefully he's going to end up at GMS in 2022. Hopefully that does happen going forward. We're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Justin Haley. As Justin Haley is going to be driving 16 for Kaulig Racing this weekend here at Talladega Super Speedway. Now, the reason that Justin Haley is into 16 this weekend and not the 77 this weekend is because Kaz Grala, who originally was supposed to drive the 16 car, is still currently recovering from an injury after getting involved in a really bad accident at Daytona, where he got some injuries, I think either on his leg or his arm, he got some injuries. So that's why that Justin Haley is in the 16 car and not in the 77 car this weekend. Now, what do I expect for Justin Haley going into this weekend in that number 16 car? I think that Justin Haley will be a very surprising contender. The call car's 16 car has generally been really, really fast. Look at Kaz Grall in the 16 car this year when he ran at Talladega. He's able to get up to the top 5. And the 16 car, especially, has shown a lot of speed on super speedways. And I do think, especially with his Xfinity Series prowess and how good he is on super speedways, I think Justin Elliott could be a surprising upset. He could pull off a very upset victory this weekend. But I think he'll get a top 10 this weekend. I think he has a very solid run. And I think he has a good run this weekend at Talladega. And because of Justin Elliott not driving to 77 this weekend, there is going to be another driver as we jump into the next story. As Justin Allgaier is going to be driving to 77 for Spire Motorsports this weekend at Talladega, with Brant backing this weekend at Talladega Super Speedway. Now, Justin Allgaier has already made one start this year in the Cup Series, substituting, I believe, for Justin Haley in the Cup Series race at Dover earlier this year. So he did make a start earlier this year after, I think it was someone got injured, or he basically had to substitute for somebody earlier this year. So Justin Allgaier making his second Cup Series start of the 2021 season. To me, I think Justin Allgaier, especially since he'll be running the Xfinity Series, I do think that Justin Allgaier is going to have some very solid experience going into that event. So hopefully Justin Allgaier is able to have a very solid run this weekend. I think he'll have a very good shot. The Spire cars especially were really, really fast in Daytona. So I do think that he'll have a very good shot of contending. And good luck to Justin Allgaier this weekend for Spire Motorsports. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Rodney Childers. As Rodney Childers will not be crew chief for Kevin Harvick this weekend, as he has been suspended for this upcoming race at Talladega. And the reason is because 2 lug nuts on the car were not safe and secure, and he also gets a $20,000 fine for the lug nuts not be safe and secure. If you're going to have one track where the crew chief really doesn't 100% matter, this isn't one track where this isn't as big of a deal to me, because Rodney Childers isn't as big of a factor when it comes to that in that situation. Again, it sucks that basically he's not going to be able to overall crew chief this weekend and oversee the team, especially since this team is currently in the NASCAR Cup Series Plus. But at the same time, like I said, if you're going to have one race where if you're going to have issues and you're going to have lug nut problems, this is the one track where it's not the end of the world if you do have lug nut issues. So it is what it is overall, and hopefully Rodney Childers won't have any issues in a couple weeks. And he should be back at the Charlotte Roval, so he should be back in a couple weeks. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Christian Eckes. As Christian Eckes says his 2022 plans are not firm yet, but wants and hopes to stay with ThorSport full-time next year and compete for the championship. I really will be honest with you, I think Christian Eckes is very likely to remain at ThorSport in the 2022 season. I think he's going to actually go full-time with ThorSport this year, especially since he's coming off of a win this past weekend in Las Vegas, picking up his first career NASCAR Camping World Truck Series victory. I feel very, very confident about him going full-time with this team next year. Yes, he does bring not as much funny as other drivers bring funny in the NASCAR Truck Series. But at the same time, I do feel very, very confident about Christian Eckes overall getting an opportunity to go full-time with this team, especially since, like I said, he did have overall a good opportunity to contend in next year. So I think that Christian Eckes will have a very good shot of contending. I hope he gets a good run, and hopefully he will have a good opportunity to run full-time with ThorSport next year. Because like I said, I think Christian Eckes has a really good shot of contending, and hopefully he'll be able to go full-time with ThorSport in 2022. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the 2022 Toyota Tundra TRD Pro that will be run in the NASCAR Camping World Truck Series for 2022, as that has officially been revealed. We've already seen the Ford that has officially been revealed. Chevy has not revealed their 2022 truck, but we now have seen the Toyota Tundra TRD Pro that we are going to see next year. Now, I've seen a lot of people, to be perfectly honest with you, that have not overall been big fans of this truck. I'm one of those people that has not been really against overall the Toyota Tundra TRD Pro truck. And the reason is I actually really like this lot. It's actually, in my opinion, better than last year's truck, in my honest opinion. Again, I know a lot of people are not a big fan of it. I've seen the truck itself. It's not really the most pretty thing in the world, and it's not the most prettiest thing, but I do like the TRD Pro truck a lot more, and I don't know how big of a competitive advantage it is going to have overall as a whole going into next year. But to me, I'm not against it like a lot of people are. I think it looks really, really nice. I think they did a really good job on it. It looks really, really cool. And I'm looking forward to seeing it next year. Like I said, I know a lot of people have not overall big fans of the Toyota TRD Pro truck, but I'm not one of those people that has really been a big fan overall on it as well. So that's good to hear overall for sure. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about a couple next-gen tidbits that have come out overall. Now, the first one that came out was on Friday evening. Basically, TRD's David Wilson, talking to the media after the truck unveiled, said Drew Herring's Texas wreck at a next-gen test in July destroyed the car, and Herring walked away. which is a good sign for the safety of the next-gen car. Now, if you remember about a month or two ago, there had been some rumors about the next-gen safety and that the crash test dummy had unfortunately died. But then NASCAR came out and basically revealed that those rumors are not exactly true, which was really, really good to hear. And the fact that you're hearing after that crash in July at Texas Motor Speedway, remember there was a tire test in July at that track. The good news is that he was all right and got out of the car. It's really good to hear that because, again, there have been some potential that Texas Motor Speedway is a very, very tough track, especially when it comes to tires and all that stuff. It was great to hear that he was basically all right in that situation because, again, you don't want anybody to get seriously hurt, and we want to make sure the safety of these cars is really, really good, especially since we're going into a new car, especially these cars have been a little bit unstable going into corners, especially at a track like Texas Motor Speedway where PG1 does overall affect even in a tire test. It was good to hear that he was all right in that situation. I'm really happy about that. But the other next-gen tidbit that did come out, and David Wilson was talking about this, he says he believes that TRD and all the manufacturers are behind regarding the next-gen car. He said when the schedule was rolled out earlier this year, we all knew it was going to be asking a lot. The original schedule had parts being released to teams in the middle of June, and I don't think that they got released until a month later in July. We're all behind, and that's just a fact. This does not surprise that the team's a little behind. I do think that COVID-19 did affect basically the supply and demand, especially look at every industry across the world, not just the NASCAR industry, but every industry across the world. I do think that there has been an effect in regards to people being able to get next-gen parts and pieces in general right now. So it does not surprise me one bit that there have been issues in regards to parts and pieces coming out. Again, you're going to have some teams that are going to be struggling, and they did mention, and he did mention as well, that it does look like some teams are still going to be developing and going into next year, which will hopefully as time goes on, which means this car is not absolutely going to be perfect. But what I've said for a long time is that while this car doesn't have to absolutely be perfect right from the beginning in the drop, and in the long run, this car has to eventually be really, really good because if this car does not succeed long term, this sport for a very, very long time could be running into problems trying to regroup itself. And we're going to have this next-gen car for a very, very long time. So hopefully long term that this does not create many, many problems and hopefully everyone will be able to receive their parts and pieces. I mean, from what we heard that a lot of teams did not even receive some of their parts until even a month ago. Some of the uncharted teams that basically are still waiting for the next-gen stuff. They're like the last teams on the recommended to basically get that stuff. That is definitely unfortunate. Some teams are overall behind in regards to that, but it is what it is. Hopefully it does not create a problem long term, and hopefully these teams won't have any issues getting this car. Again, there are some teams, especially since the limitations of the cars, which is why I'm not a big fan of them running the Clash at the beginning of the year. I understand you want to get everybody out there to get out there and run it and really show off it. But at the same time, I just think that in all seriousness, we want to make sure this car is eventually, it has to have to be perfect, but we want to make sure it's good enough, and we want to make sure that overall the safety of the next-gen car does not become a much bigger problem going forward, and next-gen does not become a much bigger problem going forward in the same time as well. So that's just my honest opinion on that. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Ty Gibbs. As Dave Burns basically said during the NASCAR Xfinity Series race, that Dave Burns pretty much confirmed that Ty Gibbs is going to be going full-time in 2022. And basically glimpse statement that Ty Gibbs is basically getting a little bit of experience running up front for next year. It is expected that Ty Gibbs is going to go full-time in 2022. Now, we haven't heard confirmation of what number he's going to run in 2022, but it's believed that after such a strong year in the NASCAR the ARCA Series, where he's been leading the championship so far this year, and has scored a whopping 10 wins in the NASCAR in the ARCA Series, and has scored 3 Xfinity Series wins so far in 2022. Of course, he does overall have the best car in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, but Ty Gibbs has overall been very solid and has been very impressive so far, and especially since he's only 18 years old. Now, like I said, he does have the best car out there, but you have to really put your foot where your mouth is, and you have to show that you're able to be really, really competitive, especially in a car that seems like really, really good for a driver like Ty Gibbs. Now, like I said, the number has been confirmed. It is believed that Ty Gibbs will probably end up getting the flagship car of the 18. It's also unclear what is going to happen with the rest of Joe Gibbs Racing going to next year. We don't know what their lineup is going to be. We're going to talk about Daniel Hemric here on the channel in just a little bit. Like I mentioned, he's going to be going to a new team next year. We know that Harrison Burr is going to be going to Woodbury. We don't specifically know the future of a driver like Brandon Jones. Brandon Jones does bring a lot of funding over to Joe Gibbs Racing, but at the same time, we don't know if he's going to be returning to team next year or if he's going to end up going up to the Cup Series in 2022, considering he's been in the Xfinity Series for a long time, and he does bring some funding. Maybe a team like Gaunt Brothers Racing is going to look at a driver like Brandon Jones and maybe bring him up. There's also been some potential rumors that John Hunter Nemechek may go full-time in the Xfinity Series next year at Joe Gibbs Racing next year. There's also been Matty Diesman, also not to mention, brought up in that conversation as well for next year, maybe going over to Joe Gibbs Racing in 2022. I think that Ty Gibbs, so going into next year, if he isn't for sure going to go full-time, which I expected, I think that Ty Gibbs ultimately is going to be the best performing driver at Joe Gibbs Racing next year. I think that's a little bit of a hot take considering he's not going to be in the flagship 54 next year, but I think that he will be very, very fast next year, and I absolutely think he's going to be a championship contender. Now, he's going to be going up against guys like Justin Allgaier, Daniel Hemric, Josh Berry, Noah Gragson, Sam Mayer, among others, that he's going to be competing with against those drivers full-time next year. But I think that Ty Gibbs will have a chance of beating all those drivers. He's very good at road courses. He's shown what he's been able to do. And he's probably going to have a very solid crew chief like a Chris Gale, who's worked him a lot of the year so far in the Xfinity Series. I think especially since he's finishing up the last few races of the year, I think Ty Gibbs will be a big benefit and asset especially since after a very strong year in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, I think that Ty Gibbs will bring a lot to the table to this team, and I think he's going to be a big benefit going forward for this team, and hopefully he'll be able to perform going into 2022. Now we're going to jump onto the first of three major stories of today's episode, as we are talking about Portland. As was reported by Jordan Bianchi from The Athletic, that NASCAR is finalizing plans to add Portland to the NASCAR Xfinity Series schedule in 2022. The NASCAR Xfinity Series and Truck Series schedules are expected to be revealed in the coming days, but it is believed that Portland is very, very likely to be joining the NASCAR Xfinity Series schedule. Unclear if they are going to join the NASCAR Truck Series schedule in 2022, but it is believed going into next year that Portland is going to be joining the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2022. I think that this is really, really huge for the NASCAR Xfinity Series for many, many reasons. Number one, Portland has been on the NASCAR schedule in the past. They actually raced in the Truck Series, I believe, in 1999 and 2000. I thought they raced in 2001, but I double-checked, and they raced there in 1999 and 2000. And I believe it was Andy Houston who won one of those races, and Greg Biffle who won the other race. Or was it Dennis Esser? I'm not exactly sure. But there were a couple drivers who raced in the Truck Series back in 99 and 2000 that were able to win at that track. Also, the ARCA West Series currently races there at the moment. Now, they had kind of a debacle in the ARCA West race where basically Taylor Gray took out, I think it was Jake Drew, and put him into that area, and those top two got penalties. But Taylor Gray pretty much kind of got a very lucky win after the top two got disqualified after the race. But that track has been really re-emerging as a very popular track. You look at the IndyCar Series as well. IndyCar made its return there in 2018, where I believe Takuma Sato won that race. In 2019, Will Power won. And this past year, the IndyCar champion in 2021, Alex Palou, was able to win at Portland very clutch, because that was able to help him pretty much secure the championship, because with that win, he was able to pretty much secure the championship. But I think there's another big reason why this is really important. NASCAR has been looking, they basically said that they have been looking to go up into the Northwest, Pacific Northwest area, where there really isn't any racing in those four areas of the country, those four specific states. And going up to that Portland area specifically, I think that's going to be huge to opening up that market. And if this event succeeds, now we don't know how good a facility it is. I think IndyCar has been able to hold some very solid races, but we haven't been able to see how the facility is going to hold up, and what is attendance going to be like, and what is COVID going to really have? Is COVID going to really have an effect, or is this race going to be later in the year? And maybe the Xfinity Series is going to have a complimentary week with the IndyCar Series going into 2022, because IndyCar is going back there in 2022. I'm not exactly sure, but what I will say is that there's got to benefits this. It is another road course for the Xfinity Series and IndyCar, and I think Xfinity's got 6 road courses as of right now for next year, potentially 7 or even 8 going into next year. And I think this also supports the theory of more short tracks and more road courses for NASCAR, as NASCAR has been getting away from a lot of the intermediate races for 2022. They are going up in that Portland area. And if this event is able to succeed for Xfinity, and I do think Xfinity will put on a good show, considering the Xfinity Series on road courses have generally been really, really awesome to watch. This also most likely will be no live pit stops for the race as well, because since they're going to be out in the Northwest, there's probably going to be no live pit stops overall for those crews as well, which is definitely really, really interesting. I'm definitely intrigued to see how this event overall goes. I think that we'll see a lot of it in that event. We'll see guys like Ty Gibbs and AJ Allmendinger around others that are going to be very, very competitive in that event. So I'm really excited that Portland is probably going to be coming to the NASCAR Xfinity Series schedule. We should be getting a review on that very, very soon. And I'm definitely looking forward to seeing the NASCAR Xfinity Series schedule in 2022. And now we're going to go on to the next major story of today's episode, as we are talking about Daniel Hemric. Now, Kaulig Racing on Friday evening, right after the Truck Series, basically teased their plans in regards to their 2022 Xfinity Series driver. And if you take a look at the image, the earlobes and everything pretty much match up. Daniel Hemric is officially going to be driving the number 11 for Kaulig Racing in 2022. Sponsorship has not been announced currently at this moment, but it's believed that Poppy Bank is going to be sponsoring Daniel Hemric in 2022. I'll be honest with you, I did not see this coming. I really thought that Daniel Hemric was going to return to Joe Gibbs Racing in 2022. Yes, Daniel Hemric has not won a race in the NASCAR Xfinity Series here, but Daniel Hemric has been extremely consistent and currently sits in the top 4 in the NASCAR Xfinity Series points. So he's been extremely consistent throughout this year. Like I said, he's never won a race. He has the most top 5 sprinting driver in NASCAR all time that has basically never won a race. I think he's got 56 or 57 career top 5s in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. But Daniel Hemric is an excellent and a very, very solid driver. And there's a reason why teams are picking up. And I'll say this. This is the 4th or 5th team that has picked him up. He's driven for a team like Richard Childress Racing, which he drove for them in 2017 and 2018. Then went up to the Cup Series with RCR. Then last year, he went down and drove for Junior Motorsports on a part-time basis, and we thought he was going to be able to win in that A car, but he wasn't able to do that. This year, he's driven for Joe Gibbs Racing. He's been close to winning at points, but he's not been able to win. And now next year, he's going to be driving an 11 car for Kaulig Racing. I think that this is a good acquisition for Kaulig Racing, and a lot of people are asking, why does Daniel Hemric, despite not winning racing, trust me, I want Daniel Hemric to win, but why do they keep picking up Daniel Hemric, who's never won a race? And there's a couple reasons why. Number one, Daniel Hemric brings sponsorship. Remember, Nutrien AG is dropping their sponsorship from Kaulig Racing this year. It's unclear if they're going to keep Jeb Burton in their organization next year, but there's a good chance that Jeb Burton might not be returning next year. And Daniel Hemric brings Poppy Bank sponsorship, which has been sponsoring for the last couple of years in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. They sponsored with Junior Motorsports last year, and they sponsored pretty much for the majority of the year except this upcoming next or one race or two at Texas Motor Speedway. They haven't sponsored him up until then, but basically for the majority of the year, Poppy Bank has sponsored Daniel Hemric so far in the 2022 season. The other reason is he's extremely consistent and he does not wreck or destroy equipment. You look at Daniel Hemric. Daniel Hemric's been extremely consistent. He was so consistent in 2018 that if we had not had the playoff system and we had the regular season championship where they basically ran from start to finish like Xfinity had up until 2016, Daniel Hemric would actually have been your 2018 champion. Now, people would have raced differently. I know we get that argument at the same time. But Daniel Hemric was so consistent with Richard Childress Racing in 2018 that he'd been able to win the championship. People do not consider consistency to be a talent, and people always look at wins being a major factor. And wins don't mean everything. Look at my Sire in the Xfinity Series this year. My Sire has 1 win so far, Xfinity, and what else has he done? He's done absolutely nothing. And it's just why he's probably going to be getting out of a ride for a potential veteran next year. And there's a reason why Daniel Hemric continues to get really good opportunities, especially with the sponsorship. I know people want him to win. And trust me, I've been frustrated that Daniel Hemric has not gotten to win. And I thought by this point this year, he would have been able to win. But let's give a little bit of respect to Daniel Hemric's name and show that he absolutely deserves respect. I've gotten some people saying that wins matter a lot more for drivers and stuff. But let's be honest with ourselves. Is wins matter than everything that Daniel Hemric would not continue to get rides. And he's a very likable guy too, not to mention that. And I think that he will get a win next year. I know I've been saying that for a couple of years, but I do think, especially with Kaulig Racing, he has a higher chance. And I think it's a one specific type of tracks and a specific type of track only. And that is on the super speedways. You look how good the Kaulig cars are on super speedways. I know they're not going to have Justin Haley next year because he'll be going full-time in Cup next year with Kaulig Racing. But I think that this team will be very strong going into next year. And I think that Daniel Hemric will be very fast next year with Kaulig Racing. So I'm really excited to see Daniel Hemric go to Kaulig Racing. What are my expectations for him? I think that Daniel Hemric will actually get at least 1 or 2 wins next year. I really think that is going to happen. I don't want to jinx him or nothing, but I think Hemric's finally going to get some wins next year. And I think he's going to be a contender for the championship. I think this 11 car is going to show a lot of speed. And I think that Daniel Hemric will finally, and I mean seriously finally, will pick up his first career NASCAR Xfinity Series win in 2022. I think he gets it done next year. And now we're going to jump on to the final major story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the Kevin Harvick and Chase Elliott beef, because there's been more details come out in regards to that. Kevin Harvick speaking to media in regards to that has some very interesting comments. And he says that Chase Elliott last week's talks last night was like talking to his 9-year-old son, Keelan. He then reiterated that I don't care if you're the most popular driver or not. You can't race everybody side drafting, bouncing off their doors, and then slam into them. That stuff all comes for circle in this deal. Then Chase Elliott basically responded by saying that I care less about this confrontation than I have ever had any type one in this path. And he's also trying to basically move on up to this point. Now I'm going to overall give you a little bit of backstory in regards to the situation with Chase Elliott and Kevin Harvick. Chase Elliott and Kevin Harvick were battling for the win with about 40 laps to go in this race. Kevin Harvick had his best car so far in 2021. He's been pretty solid so far in the Cup Series points and so far in the playoffs so far. And he had his best run going where he's led about 70 laps up to this point so far. And they were battling really hard for the lead, and Kevin Harvick was a little bit faster than Chase Elliott. Going into turn number, I believe it was going to turn number 3, we were at around 35 laps to go. They split a car, and Chase Elliott kind of squeezed Kevin Harvick going into the corner. Then Kevin Harvick got really, really loose in the corner and shot up to the track and basically Chase Elliott got in the outside wall and got a cut tire. Then Chase Elliott came back out onto the racetrack and then slammed Kevin Harvick into the inside of his car, basically trying to cut his tire down up to that particular point. Then Chase Elliott basically ran Kevin Harvick's line and held Kevin Harvick up just enough to where Kyle Larson was able to basically make a pass around 4 or 5 laps to go. Kevin Harvick basically then tried to wreck Kevin Harvick basically tried to wreck Kyle Larson. In the corner, Kyle Larson had an incredible save at Bristol, and Kevin Harvick lost the race because of that, and Kyle Larson was able to go on and win and basically advance away, even though he already locked his way into the next round regardless. But he was able to get that win, and Kevin Harvick and Chase Elliott, right after the race, they had a confrontation on pit road. They got mad at each other. Kevin Harvick with his helmet up basically went over to Chase Elliott and got really, really mad up to this point. Then Chase Elliott and them started arguing. Right after that, Kevin Harvick speaking to, I think it was Dave Burns, or I don't know exactly who he's speaking to, right after the race, he basically said that what Chase Elliott did was a chicken shit move. Basically said we're racing for the freaking win, and then basically said that Chase Elliott had a temper tantrum, we're really racing hard for the win, had a temper tantrum, and then Kevin Harvick said, I don't really care what the fans think up to this point. Right after that interview, I think it was Chase Elliott was interviewing Marty Snyder, and Chase Elliott basically said that I don't care how much experience you have in the sport, I'm going to stand up for myself, and Chase Elliott then did mention that Kevin Harvick had basically cut his tires a couple weeks ago at Darlington, and they had problems going there, and Kevin Harvick has raced Chase Elliott really, really hard. And then after basically all that happened, they were baking outside of the trailer hauler, I think it was for Chase Elliott, and they're basically talking out there. They had confrontation. Their guy right there, basically Kevin Hart's PR guy, was sitting next to her. Then they got mad at Jordan Bianchi, and then basically Chase Elliott said, hey, this is between you and me. Leave your guy. Basically was telling Kevin Harvick's PR guy, leave him alone. Leave me alone. Leave me alone. This is between Harvick and me. And they got really mad at each other. And then these comments come out. So if you really want my honest opinion on the situation, I don't think 100%. I do think that they're 50-50. But I'm very intrigued to see how, if this beef is going to continue on going forward. Now, the broadcast really did not mention about this so much. I think did a really good job not talking about this and really egging on like the media has been really doing overall. Myself have been egging on the situation. I'm still on the side of Chase Elliott in this situation, but I'm not as mad at Kevin. Again, I was not mad at Kevin Harvick, but I think Kevin Harvick was really at fault for the situation. Well, I think they were 50-50 in this situation, let's be honest. But I don't think they're exactly even, considering Chase Elliott pretty much finished 25th in the race, and Kevin Harvick was still able to finish runner-up. Yes, he lost the race, but Kevin Harvick had really not as much of a right to be as mad at Chase Elliott as Chase Elliott had a right to be mad at Kevin Harvick, considering Chase Elliott basically lost contention race after having his tire go down, and Kevin Harvick had issues right there. Like I said, to me, I think they're both eventually going to get crossed. And what happens, especially going into Martinsville, because I do think that is the next potential race, or going into Charlotte Roval. Are these two going to have more problems going down the line? Are we going to see retaliation in Martinsville if these two get into confrontations going forward? I'm not exactly sure what's going to happen between these two going forward, because again, like I said, I think that these two in the past have basically been having problems before. I don't know if they've really had problems up to this point until now, but the fact that Kevin Harvick also said that this is the maddest he's been as really ever in his whole entire career, considering he's used to be really, really mad back in the day against guys like Kyle Busch and Denny Hamlin in the past. He's really not happy with Chase Elliott after that, and he basically said that I don't really talk to a lot of younger drivers either. At the same time, though, there could be confrontation, especially if Kevin Harvick's not able to make it out of this round, Chase Elliott's able to make it in this round. I think that Kevin Harvick is going to make Chase Elliott's life a lot more of a living hell, especially if we get to Martinsville. I think that these two could eventually have problems. It's definitely interesting that Kevin Harvick's so mad. Chase Elliott seems like he's kind of trying to move on from the situation, but Kevin Harvick is still not very happy about the situation. I just want these guys to get along and eventually basically not fight anymore because I want to see these two be able to race really hard. I like both drivers a lot. I have nothing really against both drivers, but I'm more of a fan of Chase Elliott than Kevin Harvick. But that being said, I definitely find it very interesting about those comments, and definitely interesting that Kevin Harvick is still not the happiest with Chase Elliott. So, anyway, that is going for today's NASCAR news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notification so you're notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and support our page. Well, let's go below for that and comment your thoughts on today's video. What are your thoughts about Chase Elliott and Kevin Harvick's confrontation? Do you think that there's going to be more retribution, and do you think there's going to be retaliation from these drivers going forward down the season, or do you think that this beef is officially over? Let me know in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about all the other NASCAR stories discussed here today on the channel? Let me know in the comments below. Anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's video, and I'll see you guys next time for some more great and awesome NASCAR content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.